So next up, coming up, we have got Jeff Gomez, who is somebody who I have huge respect for. I first came across Jeff around 2009 when we were creating a sort of multi-platform story, a transmedia story, and we were kind of doing some stuff that Jeff had names for in terms of story worlds and the way that things were kind of developing as kind of worlds of story. And I remember particularly him saying in a talk about how transmedia and kind of modern stories needed to have an ear on the story, and that kind of stayed with me for till now, really. And that's kind of partly why I've asked him to come on at the Modern Audience Conference to talk about what he's doing these days. So welcome to Mac, Jeff. And really pleased to have you. I know you've got some really interesting stuff to talk about. Um, I, yeah, I'm fascinated to know where this is going and some of your thoughts on kind of the contemporary themes and issues that I know that you've got in your presentation. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over and I'm going to have a cup of tea and watch what you got to say, and then we're going to come back on for some Q&A shortly. But yeah, welcome. Really nice to have you.
Fantastic, Krishna, and thank you, everyone. This is really exciting for me because I'm going to be talking about a few things that I have not talked about before, and so you'll forgive me if I stumble occasionally because I have rarely articulated these new thoughts in this way. What I would ask of everyone is to make space. You might not like everything I have to say. Some of these ideas will be a little bizarre, and you know, I've gotten smacked around on social media for articulating some of this. But I feel passionately about this, and that has always been what has led me to kind of explore, strange new worlds. It's dangerous sometimes, but it's also so exciting. Shall I begin?
Yeah, go for it. I'm going to turn myself off and sit back and listen. So
Let me know, Krishna, if you can see the New York skyline full screen.
we can see the New York skyline full screen. Yes,
Fantastic. Okay,
floor is yours.
people, thank you so much. Here we go. So this is Collective Journey, and it is about a kind of reframing story for our new consideration. Things are happening, and what I want us to do is to kind of go within ourselves and and do what I've done all my life, which is kind of float in space, very much alone, in the darkness, and sometimes there are monsters out there, and it's frightening, and sometimes there is the source of great creativity and the ability to see what's going to happen next. So I'll start by talking about who I am and where I'm coming from. Um, um, I did not know what a franchise architect was. What I was trying to do was, understand why these stories, which were so precious to me as a child growing up in a very chaotic environment, why they were so important, why they worked, why some of them were so old and yet persisted, why some of them had fans, and I'm talking about a time where fandom was not organized, and so I was alone in my fandom, but I sure did love the stuff, and how some worlds deepen over time while others kind of fall apart and kind of go away. Um, the thing that kind of distinguished me from all the other kids was that there was something strange going on in my mind. I'm not sure whether it was connected to trauma and chaos, of which I have to tell you, there was a lot, or whether there was just some neurodivergence going on in my brain. But I kept seeing things that other people didn't. Some of them I knew to be intrusive and dark thoughts, but others were genuine concerns because I was growing up in a very dangerous world, a world that was dangerous out in the streets. Unfortunately, a world that was also dangerous to me in my own home. I was looking anywhere I could find to come and help me and protect me. That's my building. I grew up in the projects in the Lower East Side. I'm a Puerto Rican Jew, so that was quite a combo back then. It was frowned upon and made a lot of problems for myself and my family. That's my dad. He's Afro-Latino. And I grew up in the 60s and early 70s as a child where it seemed that violence and chaos was just everywhere, from gang violence to the stuff that was going on overseas in Vietnam, to corporal punishment, to just general entertainment. It was heavy stuff, people. I did not retreat into childhood cartoons, the conventional stuff that was on TV. I found myself drawn to the serious stuff, the stuff that took itself seriously and expanded upon itself. There were multiple movies in the Godzilla series and the Planet of the Apes series. Tolkien's work, it went on and on and on for a 10, 11, 12-year-old forging my way through those novels. Of course, proto-Japanese anime, those characters remembered what happened in previous episodes. They were on epic journeys, and there was a rich sophistication to their worlds, a kind of mythology. As I entered into adolescence, there was a real struggle going on inside myself between these kind of nerdy passions and this dark, repetitive, intrusive thought process. And so I wandered the streets of Times Square, trying to orient myself and often not doing a great job of it. All these factors were kind of coalescing, though, in my mind. Remember, I was teaching myself to observe everything and anything because it either interested me or because it was dangerous and I was protecting myself. And I would constantly be reconfiguring all of this in order to navigate. And eventually, these did not feel like separate things. They felt like puzzle pieces that I could put together. And it was almost as if I were creating, despite myself sometimes, a map to get myself out of this situation. So to me, stories were not just escapism, although I loved the fantastical aspects. They were ways so that I could orient myself, so that I could emotionally train myself, often to be brave, often to be clever enough to evade violence. These were mythic frameworks. And those myths gave to me something that was vital, meaning. So I slowly realized that story wasn't just teaching me to survive. The great story worlds that I got myself lost in they were teaching me how to perceive and eventually how to bend reality. Because when I was absorbing these characters who were doing things in what felt like practical ways to surmount enormous challenges, dark evil, Frodo carrying that ring, Sam carrying Frodo. Um, they were teaching me that there had to be a way, and that I had to be able to change my circumstances. So there were these two visions in my adolescence, a kind of at war with themselves. There was this notion of making sense of things, coherence, creating a narrative for myself that was a journey to what I hoped would be happiness and success, meaning, and establishing for myself a moral architecture, the thing that distinguished me from the others around me who were doing harm. In Times Square, which I did spend a lot of time in watching those quadruple features of kung fu movies or truly grotesque horror films, I was bearing witness to spectacle, to how we as a people can kind of fall apart, and fragment, indulge in our appetites at the most base level, distracting ourselves from our own suffering. So the future of storytelling, actually, if you think about it, kind of collides between these two poles. And it's a balancing act that I have had to walk ever since. What I also was learning as I started to get older was that great story worlds have engines of wisdom within them, so we're not just consuming The Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or one of my favorites, Naruto. We are internalizing the values, identity, the ontology, the way of being that was embodied by the characters in these worlds. So, the way I survived people, the way I got out of my teenage years alive, was because I learned from these narratives, these epic narratives, that I was not evil for having dark thoughts or being lost in Times Square movie theaters or doing things that I was ashamed of. I was not evil. I was able to see the system that divided me from myself. And now we're in the swinging 1980s. And David Bowie, God bless him, because I love him, and he made this observation when he first started working with computers, that everything is going to change. We are no longer going to lean back and watch the narrative or absorb the narrative. And the narrative was no longer going to remain solely on screen or on the page. There is a gray space in between us where we can get up and touch the narrative, and where the narrative can come down and touch us. So creator, audience, the system around us, our ability to participate, we all become part of one another's story worlds, just as we do in reality. Narrative was becoming porous. I took that sensibility and what I learned from Japanese popular culture and Marvel comic books with their contiguous universes spread across dozens and dozens of comic book titles. And I started to apply them to my work, first in tabletop role-playing games, and then in comics, and then in video games when my comic book company, Valiant Comics, which I worked for, was acquired by Acclaim Entertainment. I took advantage of that collaboration to develop the Turok Dinosaur Hunter video game for the Nintendo 64, and then Magic the Gathering. I created a story world that Wizards of the Coast could use, so that I could create comic books and video games set in the brand new universe of Magic the Gathering Dominaria. Um, so those two big successes enabled me to start Starlight Runner Entertainment with my partner Mark there, and I kind of turned my kind of native ability to understand these universes into a kind of process where I would analyze the narrative, innovate the story world, which is to make it better, kind of make it able to extend beyond a screenplay or an individual medium, and become a kind of mythology, a continuous universe, a canon that can extend itself across multiple media platforms. And I call this transmedia storytelling. As I was reading about the work of Henry Jenkins and the early transmedia pioneers, which I'm proud to have been a part of. One of the most important things about all of this was this notion that story was a kind of at its conclusion in terms of simply being broadcast one way. It was going to be a dialogue. Story was going to interact more and more quickly with a mass audience, and their feedback was going to impact how the story unfolded across various media. So I wanted to do this. I wanted to create entertainment franchises. So what I realized was I was actually studying how meaning survives across systems, right? Because in the old days, when you created a comic book or a video game of a popular movie, it sucked. It was kind of a knockoff. They used the cheapest materials. They weren't thinking very much. They generally just repeated the story you just saw, and that was not meaningful. I loved these story worlds, and I wanted every aspect of what I encountered to be a meaningful addition to that world. And so meaning needed to survive across systems. Look at this, people, and take a moment, man. This kid was not going to make it. And these are the story worlds that came to me as a result of my success with Turok and Magic, and then with Mattel and Hot Wheels and all these other wonderful projects we were doing. These were meaningful interactions with these intellectual properties as I helped these clients to develop their mythologies and extend them across multiple media. I even got to create some original story worlds. The Land of Corridor for Magic, Hot Wheels World Race. It was just a dream come true. Truly fortunate to be this successful. Excuse me. So as we moved through the aughts, I really started to notice a change. The rise of social media, the rise of mobile, the use of narrative in ways that were unprecedented in human history. So there was a shift, and the structure of narrative itself is changing. We are living inside a narrative transition. Stories are no longer contained to individual works or complete deliveries. They are no longer linear. because even a linear story has to encounter us, and our response to that story is nonlinear. They're no longer authored by a single voice. These franchises have many, many voices involved in their manifestation. So they're becoming systems, persistent, participatory, and continuous. And as I'm sure you have observed, these stories easily can spiral out of our control. I should have given you a trigger warning. It's happening everywhere, people. And it's not just TV shows and movies. The problem is happening across media. And in a way, in a cruder way, we've seen this before. We've seen great franchises diminish themselves, right? And you could always tell because the character is shot into space, right? The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they ended by going into outer space. Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th, outer space, right? They all wind up in orbit. Whole transmedia systems begin to corrupt and have problems within themselves because they're being administered irresponsibly. And of course, we are seeing in unprecedented way a corrosion in global narrative ecosystems. We are witnessing entire systems exposing themselves, and we are seeing the rot inside of them. So I've been studying all of this for the past 20 years, very closely and in practical ways as a consultant. So here is my observation. The heroic model is faltering, and I am recommending that we reconsider the heroic model and consider something that I'm calling systemic narrative. We all know the hero's journey. The hero's journey is hardwired into the human brain. Why? Because a couple 100,000 years ago, we were emerging from caves, and it was an extraordinarily dangerous world. And so we had to move through these phases because we were afraid. We needed to be trained. We needed to go out there and get what our community needed in order to survive. And then when we returned home with the boon, with the food or the people that were necessary for our tribe to persist, we were rewarded and honored. And so that was heavily conflict-oriented because once we left the familiar, we had to do battle physically in order to survive. So this locks us into this notion that there was an enemy out there that needed to be defeated. Even if that enemy was something that we honored, like an animal, we needed to confront it and do battle. So our default psychological mechanism as we move out into the world tends to be the war stance. We are ready to fight. It almost turns us on to be ready to engage in conflict. We have entire cultural subsystems about the clashing of two different sides. And of course, we've all heard our leaders say things like, "Only I can save you." So there's a model of rightness. We all see ourselves as the heroes of our own lives. And so the hero's journey reinforces a certainty. We've got to be right. If we're wrong, then everything we know is a lie. We have to think of ourselves in an exceptional way and see things that disagree with our sense of self as opposition. and therefore there is a kind of polarization that asserts itself, and as we all know, that is extremely easy to manipulate, and it's getting us into more and more trouble at a more and more global level. So this cyclic hero's journey mentality, and there is no shade. I'm not throwing any shade on the work of Joseph Campbell or the richness and sophistication of the Campbellian approach to global mythology. I was raised on it. I love it and I embrace it, and I know it is a part of who we are. But what I'm seeing is that it continually returns us to conflict, and conflict is getting more and more dangerous for the human race. There is drama and disquiet in the Hollywoodization of the heroic model. Your screenwriter professors will tell you every page must have conflict. You must drive that character in a linear fashion to a satisfying conclusion, and therefore you need a protagonist who is someone that the audience wants to be defeated, perhaps even hates, and will celebrate the hero conquering that villain. And of course, everything is based on the idea that our protagonists are involved with scarcity and the fears that are associated with scarcity, and our villains tend to be people with abundance. And it's really just I find it to be an unfortunate conflict cycle. It rewards domination over reconciliation. In the hero's journey, at the end of the story, the hero may win, but the community loses. And this is really one of the deepest problems that I'm finding with simplistic hero's journey narratives. The community never develops self-efficacy because they are reliant on the hero in these narratives. And without the hero, all would be lost, right? So we're wired to depend on someone coming to save us. And that person, people, does not always have our best interests at heart. I was in Australia engaged in a consultation because some of my work in narrative has to do with geosocial issues. What applies to narrative in fiction is really just a mirror to how we're applying narrative within our own lives. So there was a crisis with Aborigine and Torres Strait Islander people in Western Australia, and they brought me over to see if I could help create narratives that would inspire both Australian universities and their Aborigine and Torres Strait Islander students to collaborate better so that more students could graduate from college. And I thought, wow, that's a fantastic idea. And I did what I usually do, which is to go there and talk about my wonderful Hollywood work and how I was going to apply some of these techniques to find the story that could help everyone involved. Boy, was I humbled because one of those students stood up in the classroom and said, how can you help us, Mr. Hollywood? Your stories are violence. And I got so angry I wanted to punch everyone in the room because they were right. How can I? These people did not respond to these cycles of violence. In fact, they had been punished by these cycles of violence. They were diminished by them. They were shamed by them, and the cyclic element and all those phases in the Campbellian hero's journey were not going to help them. I left with my tail between my legs and mulled this over for a year until I found the answer. It really bothered me, and I thought about it long and hard and studied Aborigine and Torres Strait Islander culture and narratives, deep mythic narratives. And this is what I found. I found a pedagogy. It was 40,000 years old, and it forced me to reconsider all of narrative structure, because if you look at this, this is more like how we are operating today. We're no longer in linear narratives. We are dealing with iconography, symbols, language, nonverbal language, audiovisual language. Nothing is linear anymore. It's just truly remarkable how this chart truly struck me. And what I wound up telling them when I went back there was that your way is actually the way, and that we are need to engage in a different narrative model to solve this problem of the Aborigines in Australia, but maybe, just maybe, the greater problems that we're facing in the world. Of course, it wasn't long after that the world shut down. That girl there is my daughter, and that is 8th Avenue on a Saturday night, March 2020. 8th Avenue on a Saturday night was usually jammed with cars and people. This was the COVID pandemic. And so it was really striking. We are facing environmental collapse, technologies that are destabilizing us at the global, national, and even personal level. We are polarized. Our information is fragmenting and no longer to be believed. Villains will come and go. You can kill a CEO. Within 2 or 3 days, there's going to be another CEO. These systemic problems are going to persist. And so I came up with a collective journey. We're discovering a new narrative modality that shifts us from singular heroism to this notion that one person with just a few social media accounts can amplify themselves quite significantly, reaching thousands of people. That's never happened before in human history. Any one person. There are fan bases that grow around intellectual properties and even intellectual ideas. We are networking ourselves. We are engaging on subsystems and systems and super systems across the world. So collective journey narratives, in my opinion, are flawed systems in need of repair. Story worlds are systems. Every narrative world is comprised of characters, institutions, communities, cultures, but also audiences. We have to take into account that our narratives are impacted by the people who interact with them, even by people who hear about them, and maybe even people who don't even know that they exist. We are all in rivers and streams of narrative, and so we have to think about the worlds that we're creating, even if we're just creating a world for a screenplay as a system that is in need of repair, right? Again, here's your story world, this diamond floating in space. One of those glowing points is our antagonist. Our antagonist is taking advantage of the flaw in the system. And in doing so, some people are coming to harm, maybe even a lot of people. Of course, there are others who are not harmed by what the villain is doing because the antagonist is paying them or is aligned with them philosophically. There are some points in this diamond that don't even know that there's a problem. They're living their lives, and of course, there are other characters in this diamond who are being harmed by the flaw in the system, or whose loved ones are being harmed, or who even just feel that the injustice of that flaw it ought to be stopped. So our story worlds need to behave like living systems. And if the system is broken in some way, the narrative emerges not from the defeat of the antagonist, but from the reparation of the flaw. Now, look, the antagonist may want to stop you, and there's plenty of conflict involved in that. But I want you to think about shifting your understanding of how the story resolves so that we can actually pattern for our audience how to heal, how to repair, or even replace the system. What are signifiers for collective journey storytelling? Well, we are shifting our storytelling from linear hero narratives to shared narrative transformation. So collective journey stories show us how communities kind of actualize themselves. Game of Thrones is an interesting, flawed example, but a lot of the disparate communities in Game of Thrones that were largely at each other's throats for quite some period ultimately kind of reconciled and actualized so that the winter can be staved off. Perhaps even the cycle of trauma and violence in Westeros could be stopped or broken somehow. So the narrative is driven by this system that was in need of change. That throne was torched. There are multiple perspectives operating simultaneously around that world. And the progress emerges by comparing and contrasting perspectives. And some of that does result in violence. But understanding those perspectives and showing your audience the validity of some of those perspectives, that to me is artful. That to me is interesting, and that to me is actually inclusive of our audience, particularly our global audience. So when we emerge with reconciliation and collaboration to effect systems repair, that is a practical way of conveying to our audience how something like that can be done. So collective journey is not the slaying of dragons. It is the breaking of cycles of trauma. Franchise architecture. How do we make this all make sense? So an entertainment franchise, which is something I've been working on for half my life, it's a living narrative system. As one of the architects who formalizes systemic story world narratives and franchise governments for the big studios, video game publishers, and even geosocial narratives, I design canon governments, right? Often I'm handed thousands and thousands of pages of stuff that may or may not be canon. Ever try and sift through Transformers, people? A lot of that stuff is self-contradictory. And then how does this cohere and move out across years and years of persistence of being an entertainment franchise. And how do you get all the different stakeholders from the different divisions of the company or between the company and the various license holders to the intellectual property? How do you get them to align? And then how do you assure fans that the thing that they love is being defended and protected, its integrity will remain intact, and to validate and celebrate fan ecosystems and their involvement in the intellectual property. And of course, these things are going to scale across many different media platforms. Some of them, I'm sure you know, kind of grow out of control, and we have to try and assert some control over it. So my oversight ensures coherent scalability and longevity across even decades of time. There's a problem. Most studios believed that they were building franchises. And by the way, this is true to this day. But they were actually producing disconnected expressions of the intellectual property, siloed narratives that were, entrusted to people who didn't necessarily understand the essence of these story worlds. The continuous expansion without asserting structure, that means a plan. And therefore there was contradictory messaging. These movies were sometimes saying things that were the opposite of what previous movies were talking about. And we loved those previous movies. And so the audience, some of them liked that stuff, but others didn't, and they started to fragment. So the overall response that I was observing, particularly as big entertainment franchises came into their own in the past 10 or 15 years, they said, well, if you don't care about it, why should we? And they have a point. So here are a few examples of the kind of work that we did. Way back when the sequels to Pirates of the Caribbean were being developed and produced, Disney came to me and said, listen, we had no idea that Pirates of the Caribbean was going to be this popular. We don't want to miss out. So we want to make sure that the franchise operates well across all the different divisions of Disney worldwide. They told me the divisions were not communicating to each other. So there were all kinds of different Jack Sparrows who behaved in very different ways, depending on if you were looking at the comic books in Europe or the novels out of their publishing division, the ride. All this stuff was confusing. And there were no real approval systems, no a kind of funnel or pipeline to get approvals that created persistence and consistency. And of course, the result was a fractured Pirates mythology. What we did was we toured the entire Walt Disney Company and learned everything about the way the company worked, and decided you need a unified Pirates mythology. This was a massive document that we compiled that took information not just from the three movies, because we had the scripts to movie 2 and movie 3, but from the ride and from anything else that we could find that was at all relevant. Then we centralized the way that the narrative was dealt with. We created a kind of franchise clearinghouse for Pirates of the Caribbean, attended by people who were capable of implementing the decisions that were made in that group, real genuine stakeholders. We coordinated approvals and set up a cross-divisional communication system. And so the franchise became a coherent ecosystem that was very successful. And we would work for Disney for about 7 years after that project. We came to Halo with at a time when the developer Bungie was turning Halo over to 343 Industries at Microsoft. And Microsoft understood that they needed to understand the universe of Halo and Master Chief so that they didn't alienate all these fans of Halo. So who was Master Chief, particularly after Halo 3? What we discovered was that he was kind of a cipher. Not many people knew or understood who John 117 was, who Cortana was and how she related to Master Chief and where that character was going after Halo 3. We also had this eternal war that looked like it was never going to end despite the conclusion of the third game. And of course, Microsoft was eager to expand Halo into a big media franchise. So we compiled everything we could find on Halo with the cooperation of Bungie, who understood that they wanted their character to persist in popular culture, even though they weren't necessarily involved. And we addressed the journey of Master Chief and the universe of Halo as an epic, the equivalent of a kind of American science fiction epic poem, and built an appreciation for epic narrative structure and the epic journey of this character, as if he were Odysseus or Gilgamesh or Beowulf, someone who stood for the ideals of an entire civilization. What we came up with was that the greatest warrior is the warrior who ends war. And if you infuse that essence of narrative into this character and into the universe of Halo, you really can't go wrong. And the only time I personally think that they have is when they've drifted away from that central notion. We also created a system for canonization so that the comic books and novels and anything created for Halo until the TV show could be accepted into a single canonicity. So instead of a hero's journey, the narrative structure became the infrastructure for the franchise for many years. Most recently, I was entrusted by Subaraya Productions with Ultraman. The fact that Subaraya Productions wanted to extend the Ultraman franchise into North America after it had been gone for like 25 years. There was some legal issue that prevented Ultraman from being syndicated in the United States. It was resolved. And the challenge we faced, I loved Ultraman. I grew up on Ultraman, as you might know. And so this was a true pleasure for me. But I also understood that many aspects of the Ultraman intellectual property had found its way into everything from Power Rangers to Pacific Rim to Transformers and so forth. So there were many elements of Ultraman that were familiar. It almost would look like a knockoff of other things that were based on Ultraman. So what truly distinguished the brand? What did Subaraya, E.G. Subaraya, the creator of Ultraman, actually envision when he created this character? What was the essence of the portrayal of Ultraman using these kind of rubber suits and miniature, almost toy-like cities? Was that dorky, or was that charming, or was there something even more meaningful in this kind of portrayal? What can and cannot you do as a creator of Ultraman content in North America? So we did what we always do. We asked tons and tons of questions. Stayed with Subaraya for weeks, investigating every aspect of the creation and production and development of Ultraman. And we even talked to their licensees. It's a big business overseas. And we created the Ultraman Universe mythology document, a huge a document, hundreds of pages long. And for the purposes of content in the United States that was being developed by Marvel, by Netflix, by various book publishers like Titan in the UK, what constitutes canon for the Ultraman universe and what doesn't. What we wound up doing was creating a kind of presentation and an approach that built a true appreciation for the uniqueness of the vision of Ultraman, and even helped Subaraya set the circumstances for crossovers between Ultraman and the Marvel superhero characters, which is something that Marvel really wanted, which turned out to be tremendously successful. So our fan base grew from a few thousand people who adored Ultraman and who were in their 50s to a fan base of millions in North America who were sharing with me and Starlight Runner and Subaraya Productions the experience of becoming apostles for Ultraman, introducing Ultraman to our families and friends, and enjoying watching the success of the franchise. Finally, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. I was called back to Disney to talk to them about what my thoughts were for creating a kind of Star Wars land in Disneyland and Walt Disney World. So this was really an important shift for me. And I wanted to share it with you because what I told Disney was that at this point in time, audiences don't want to go to your parks as if they're visiting a museum, even if the museum had some rides in it. They wanted to go to the world. And so my advice was to create a canonical extension of the Star Wars story world so that when you cross the threshold into Galaxy's Edge, you entered into the Star Wars universe. And there would be all kinds of narrative subroutines. These are little elements, kind of running elements through the park that were kind of like simple storylines that you can either engage in if you're perceptive or ignore. And that way, it's almost as if you could have an adventure, a Star Wars adventure in that park. And I also advise them to take that world, that extension of the Star Wars universe, and then integrate it back into the content for Star Wars that showed up in novels and comic books, perhaps even TV shows and movies. So there was almost like a LARP experience, live action role play. I wanted a little more of it than Disney has provided thus far, but stay tuned. So this became participative narrative, the notion that you can simulate a story world and have people enter into it, not as with avatars, not with characters that are not themselves, but embodied so that they could actually walk into the story world and participate in it. So this is a real transition. And I didn't have a language for how to do it or what the essence of it was. But I do now. um, so what is lying at the heart of collective journey narratives is the mythic field. I think that the mythic field is essential for systemic narrative design. That's your story world. Let me start by saying I am talking about artistic expression. And this is even when it comes to artificial intelligence and the creation of content using AI systems. We're going to talk about AI and these kind of persistent worlds that AI is going to be capable of generating. But I wanted to start by saying that the essence of artistic expression is extremely important to me. And everything I've told you thus far, I'm hoping indicates to you that, that I believe that artistic expression is the bridge between human consciousness and the act of creation. Whether you're aware of it or not, it consists of internal motivation, the need to express ourselves, our creativity, our aesthetics, the things that influenced us in life and make us want to communicate something that is unique in that it is filtered through our personal experience. Then we are choosing our medium and manifesting this communication through that medium. It is influenced by cultural and societal forces that wash through us as human beings who are artistically expressing ourselves. And of course, a lot of it relies on our ability to be free enough to communicate what it is that needs to be artistically expressed. So we, as an audience, connect with the artist's work and reflect on shared human experience. That is the beauty of art. That is the necessity of art to evolve ourselves as human beings. So the mythic field is artistic intent. The mythic field is the origin level of meaning. It's comprised of the artistic persona. That would be you. The fundamental questions that you're asking yourself or that you're attempting to grapple with or answer in the work that you are manifesting. And in doing so, whether, again, you're conscious of it or not, you're conveying messages and themes. These are the very messages that I absorbed as a child that helped me to climb out of poverty, violence, and chaos. There are archetypes in this artistic communication, in this mythic field, these icons of what is possible for us as human beings. There are aspirational drivers. Every great narrative embodies our deepest wishes, the things that we need in order to to survive, to be happy, to be loved, and to love. And they encompass systems of wisdom. These narratives, if they're not doing something to inform you, to give you rungs on the ladder that you can use to climb out of whatever issues you're dealing with, what good is it? And again, this is conscious or unconscious. So the mythic field is the gravitational center of the story world, holding everything together, determining what is and what is not about your story world. I have been determining the mythic field, the souls of these story worlds for many years. And that's why I'm so passionate about this and why I understand this so well. Look at the people I've gotten to pull these mythic fields out of. amazing talents and geniuses. And so it starts for me, this is my process, with genuine inquiry. My clients must submit themselves to my inquiry, and they're not always happy about it. And these are long, a series of questions. It also involves my being empathic and objective, because their mythic field is not my mythic field. I am not here to bend or warp or assert my mythic field onto James Cameron. So I have to be objective, and yet I know this elicitation, it can be painful. So I have to be empathic. I have to understand a little human psychology. I have to understand narratology. I have to understand mythology, and I have to be capable of analyzing what I find without, again, the temptation of telling my Avatar story or my Pirates of the Caribbean story. Often it is truly liberating for the people that we work with, because they wind up being able to articulate themselves more clearly to hundreds of people who are building out their story world. And of course, I'm using this information to help thousands of people all around the world, in the case of these big franchises, to communicate them effectively and with integrity. So when we're successful, it allows for the intellectual property to persist over years, even decades. Well, this doesn't always happen. And people, if you love these particular incarnations of Star Trek or Doctor Who, bless you. I see what you see in them, and there's plenty to like about these things. But there was a touch of incoherence in the interpretation of the mythic field of Star Trek and Doctor Who by the people who created these particular incarnations. And for some people, in fact, for large portions of the audience, and you can think of other properties where this has happened, something slowly stops feeling right. Fans start to grumble. We've seen studios push back at those fans. In fact, in some cases, really get into fights, or the actors and showrunners and so forth get into these conflicts with audience members who don't like what it is that they're seeing. And at first, there seems to be a flare-up of attention for the intellectual property when this happens, but really, ultimately, audiences start to disengage. The narrative is drifting. Participation genuinely becomes hostile at first, but then they start ignoring it, and the franchise erodes. And that's when the studio starts to recognize that they're losing money. When our story world systems falter, we're losing context. We're forgetting who we really are. And future possibilities for the intellectual property fade. And right now, I got to tell you, there's no Doctor Who in production right now, and there's no Star Trek in production right now. So, like it or don't like it, there was a problem, and we can't ignore that. Artificial intelligence, the next medium. So we're transitioning worldwide to artificial intelligence, and people, I've traveled the world over the past couple of years. There are other countries, large ones, that are in no way slowing down or hesitating. They're adopting AI, sometimes detrimentally, and certainly in terms of the content. Right now, some of it is really not good. But it's happening. And obviously, we're seeing iterations that are starting to improve. But that's not the point that I'm making. I'm not talking about AI movies or necessarily AI music or anything like that. The first phase of a new medium is that it copies old media, right? Television was just radio with pictures. um, you know, we are we're moving through that phase. The thing that does distinguish AI is that scale is not a problem. It can scale infinitely. There's real-time generation. There's continuous interaction. The AI simulates being able to listen to us, which creates, despite ourselves sometimes, a direct and ongoing engagement. And of course, there's this notion of global participation. But variation, the system's ability to just churn out different variants on its content is not meaning, right? So without coherence, all this abundance becomes fragmentation. So more than just a tool, AI is a medium capable of generating participatory storytelling environments. We're seeing the start of this in several companies that are experimenting with it and doing so relatively successfully. They're moving quickly. AI can uniquely do the following. It can listen and engage. There is ideation. It can generate scenarios based on certain input. It generates at your command, so you can respond to those ideas and a new reality can manifest right in front of you. And together you can improvise. So artists will be able to do what until now has been impossible, create fully realized participatory worlds to scale. When I was a kid, I read Larry Niven and Stephen Barnes's Dream Park. This was essentially, before Star Trek invented it, the holodeck. And there was this notion that a pair of artists who were like dungeon masters playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons can take a bunch of people and have them enter into this world, which was a 3D, fully navigable environment, and interact with them as if it were a game of Dungeons and Dragons. I was fascinated by the fact that the team that was engaged in creating this story world, which was very real down to the last detail, including the flora and fauna, was relatively small, and that artificial intelligence systems were generating this content. So what's missing in our contemporary efforts to create story worlds using AI as a distinct media platform? Well, I believe there is a missing subsystem that I believe is being worked on now, and I'm certainly consulting on it with some companies that I think is actually really exciting. The subsystem, I believe, is the coherence subsystem, which embodies the mythic field. What if you could elicit the mythic field from the creators, the artists, the people who are building this story world, and had it installed into the story world system so that it can create coherence, right? You have to determine not just what happened, but whether what happened matters in these AI story worlds. Because if you leave it unstructured, if you just let it do what it starts to do, you know what happens. It starts to kind of hallucinate. Identity blurs, the tone of the world or the piece or the scenes that you're involved in start to drift. Everything becomes kind of disposable. So we're talking about something that is not very different from the sorts of things we talked about in legacy media. So a coherent subsystem can contain the mythic field so that worlds sustain meaning and participation becomes meaningful over time. The role of the creator is that, well, if it doesn't already, it's going to have to, and we have to demand it. AI must serve authorship. It must facilitate our artistic expression. And my hope and the demand that I'm making of my partners and clients is that as a tool, these AI programs help us to create our own mythic fields, determine canonicity, and cooperate with our participants in a concrete way. So you as the artist will move from writing or writing stories or designing what the world looks like to defining the worlds. And doing so will mean writing and will mean creating original art coming out of your hands, your brains, your body. It starts there. But what happens is that we're creating worlds. Look at Grand Theft Auto. The next Grand Theft Auto encompasses, what's it going to be? 20 square miles? And it's going to do so in great detail. And it's going to be a fantastically rich world. And we're going to enjoy ourselves a lot. But it's going to, in order to do it, in order to create that, thousands of people were involved in one form or another to get that world made. And every detail of that world within that 20-mile radius was, I think, almost entirely built from assets that were devised by a team of hundreds of people. That's okay. I love it. It cost, $500 million, maybe more. And it took 7 years to do. What if we want to create an entire nation? What if we wanted to create a planet? Okay, it is not going to be possible to do that without new tools. So what I am positing here is this notion of upstream authorship, so that we can be the dreamers of dreams. And those dreams can then manifest themselves and incarnate themselves, and in fractal ways, subject to our monitoring, subject to our inspection as artists, begin to manifest entire worlds, perhaps planetary systems, maybe even galaxies. Right? So there is a shift in artistic expression when it comes to this particular medium. I am not saying that we are replacing artists. I am not saying that all other media is no longer valid. I am saying that in this particular instance, we might consider upstream authorship. It is not disappearing in this case. It is relocating from downstream expression. I'm a storyteller and I'm telling you personally a story, to upstream aesthetics. I am a world creator, right? From controlling output, meaning, concentrating on every engagement with every human being who is portraying either themselves or a character within this environment, to designing the conditions under which output engages meaningfully, right? So if your character is engaging in behavior that does not fit into the world that I'm creating because you're horrible, there are methodologies for my AI character to deal with that, or for my AI system to deal with you. Okay, so we're moving also from linear plot to the notion of open matrix system creation. People, that is unique to this medium, except for tabletop fantasy role-playing games, right? If you have a great dungeon master and you are playing in their world, and you're with your party, and you decide to go in the opposite direction than where the dungeon master wants you to go, if they're good, they will let you go, because the world unfolds around you in a continuous way. You're not moving through a tube. You are walking around in an environment that is persistent and forever. That was it. That was the only time I experienced open matrix story worlds until now, when artificial intelligence will be able to do this for you and do it for your participants in a deeply meaningful way that will allow for them to have adventures and live their lives within this world in ways that are subject to their whims, not the construct of the interactive environment. So we are the music makers dreaming into our mythic fields that can allow for this particular kind of expression. Our last bit, aspirational narratives. And this is where I do get on my soapbox, so please forgive me. If we have the power of gods, and it seems to me that stuff is happening here, we must strive to acquire the wisdom of gods, the very wisdom that allowed for me to do what it is that I've done with my life, fulfilling dreams. We have a responsibility to those kids who are like me and like you when you were a kid. So this is more than just a creative shift. This is a cultural responsibility. These systems, and they are inevitable, people, will shape identity, belonging, perception, and behavior. If we don't define them intentionally, they will default to noise, and noise can hurt us. We are seeing noise do tremendous harm, not just in this country, but elsewhere in the world. So when we're able to define the conditions under which human meaning can survive inside systems that never stop generating, whether they are global entertainment franchises, aspirational social movements, including the world we're living in today, right now, our own lives, or whether they're AI native story worlds, we will have stepped into a new frontier in human storytelling, one capable of shaping the next epoch in human history. This is genuine systemic narrative. So I invite all of you to link into me, to reach out to me, and embark on this collective journey with me. We don't just consume story worlds, we're inhabiting them right now. And through them, to scale, we can attain the discipline, the mastery, and the agency to bend reality. And I have reshape culture and help birth a new world. People, the system has exposed itself. We now can see how it works every day on social media and in the news. We see how it works. That gives us a choice. That gives us a choice. Stories taught humanity how to imagine the world. The story worlds we're building now may determine humanity and where we have, and whether or not we have a future in it. Thank you so much. Oh, that's my book, The 10 Commandments of Successful Corporate Narratives. It's available on Amazon enjoy it.
Get the book, people. Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Really fascinating stuff as ever, as I imagined it would be. First of all, I've often for a long time been in admiration of your kind of honesty and straightforwardness about your own background. And I have a similar story myself, but I've often kind of felt like it was better to keep that stuff closed up. But I'm inspired by you and your story, and I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
So that was really interesting and kind of made a lot of sense for me in terms of what where I kind of came across you first and story world and then taking this on the collective journey, which I know has been your passion over the last decade or so, and now this idea of being able to my reading of it is that it can amplify human creativity and storytelling in a way that can be positive, and it means that, but not just, sorry, I'm grasping for the kind of right way to describe it because it's quite new stuff, but it's not totally about personalization like we know in games and stuff, but it is a way of personalizing our approach on the world and sharing that in a way that has been the realm of large corporations and large media companies. I think that's one kind of reading I have of it. Obviously, it's pretty kind of in depth and there's a lot of layers to it. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and we've got some questions from the audience. First of all, I have a couple of questions for you. In terms of story worlds, what's your favorite story world? If you could pick any story world from your
Wow.
experience, just one, just one.
I like mine. I'm working on a few right now that I'm very enamored with. Um, but uh, gosh, I love them for different reasons. The world I created for Hot Wheels impacted so many kids' lives that it was that it's wonderful hearing from them as adults and how meaningful that was for them. I'm picking on my own story world. Pluribus is a fascinating a story world. The Apple TV science fiction it seems to be well thought out and certainly has something direct to say about humanity and society, and is doing so in an imaginative and compelling way. So I love these newer intellectual properties that are dealing kind of realistically with these concepts. There's a series called From on the MGM channel that is a horror series that seems to be a very rich and multi-layered and very dark story world that I find fascinating.
I'll check that one out. I know Pluribus. In a way, I think Pluribus is fascinating because it also holds up a bit of a mirror to AI and this idea of averageness, and that's fascinating. I mean, I don't know if it was planned or in response to any of that. I know that these TV shows can take a long time, but it's an interesting time to have kind of um, that kind of banality of the average of everything in a spread across everybody in the world. It's kind of crazy, really.
Sure.
In terms of collective journey narratives, I also interested in, because that's to me that's a kind of different expansion from story worlds in a way. I just wonder, who you think who could you point a finger at is doing that well?
A lot of the again the recent Pixar and Apple TV, almost all of their output lately has been collective journey narratives. In other words, not focusing on the conquest of a villain and the polarized battle between hero and villain, but this notion of community that is attempting to come to terms with itself in order to heal various flaws, various problems. So those two classes of narrative. Is her name? Is it Margot Has Money Troubles on Apple TV? A few of these shows are just really great in terms of collective journey narrative.
Right, cool. I'll check that one as well. Some questions from the audience. With How do you see younger audiences engaging with immersive transmedia story worlds, and what challenges do you think creators, IP owners have in being able to reach a younger audience or via their parents?
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually a little bit concerned because, of course, um, and we saw this back in the 70s and 80s, where you left your kid in front of the TV and they were watching whatever they were watching, and some of it might not have all been good for them. And of course, YouTube is has wonderful things in it and terrible things in it, and there's an issue. So the we've just got to um, shift our as parents, to shift our mentality into the heads of these kids, and make them understand what they're looking at, and teach them taste. What's if something is repeating itself over and over again and is monotonous, that has to be the equivalent of boredom, and is not worth your time to go through. Where something like Bluey, which is handling some fascinating themes and character development and relationship dynamics, that's something that if we perceive it as interesting alongside our child then might just do the same. I've had, as a teacher, and I do teaching, the best approach that I've really taken is to sit with my students, look at the content, and start asking them questions that causes them to build an appreciation for what it is that they're looking at. So they're not just kind of blindly absorbing this content, but able to kind of think critically about it, and appreciate it when it's good, and understand when what it's communicating is corrosive.
Yeah. I mean, I think I also see a kind of need for an update in terms of media literacy, really, like certainly post social media, but now with the advent of AI as well, it's a different kettle of fish, really, in terms of screen-based media and all of that. But I think that's a whole other conference worth of stuff rather than what we can do at the end of one day here. But yeah, it is really interesting.
Here's something that I've been dealing with kids content with some clients lately, and I'll speak very generally because I'm under NDA. But um, the instinct is to come up with a clever concept and a kind of moral of the story in terms of the entire property and franchise. And some of these are rich worlds, for tweens instead of just little kids. And I tell them, please, um, understand where this character is going, and what this character needs to learn in order to get there, so that the stories we tell don't reboot the show every half hour. The journey doesn't have to be entirely serialized, but we want there to be a journey, and to think deeply about this. And if you don't know what that process is, take the responsibility to teach yourself that process, to research. That's as much a part of researching as creating 3-view character designs for the characters you've invented. I'm shocked, Krishna, to this day that that happens so infrequently, particularly in Western media content.
Yeah. I'm not going to dig into that because I know we're kind of getting short of time. But we've got another question from the audience, which I think you dealt with it over the duration of your thing, but I'm hoping that it's okay to ask you and for you to kind of boil it down a little bit. So it's with stories now continuing and evolving even long after the original creator has left the IP. How do you try and appease the original fans and the original story whilst bringing in new fans without causing divisions between the two?
um, I'm going to be honest with you, Krishna. Personally, I have to fall in love with what it was. I must love it, and understand it intrinsically, and then be able to take it apart, right? If some of the best mechanics I know love cars and love the idea of taking apart a classic car, even if the job is to update everything about that car, right? But you update it extremely carefully, right? First by understanding exactly what was working with that car and documenting it, and making sure that everyone understands the foundational aspects of this narrative and what it was, what its intent was, what what its meaning was, and so forth. Then it really helps to be able to then introduce new talent, to create either a continuation, sequel, or even reboot of the intellectual property, and know what needs to persist. Okay, and that can be troublesome in our Hollywood environment, because I have dealt with creators who come into a property like Ultraman and say, well, that was Eiji Tsuburaya's Ultraman. This is my Ultraman. Or that was Johnny Depp's Jack Sparrow. This is my Jack Sparrow. And the answer to that is no, it's not. You have to observe these fundamental tenets about Jack Sparrow in order to portray him in such a way that his integrity and the brand is protected, and then you bring your new stuff to the mix, your imagination, your ability to give him some new elements, some to put in some parts that'll make the car go faster. Updated technology and so forth, computerize it a little bit, but the car remains essentially the car. That's the advice that I give. Those are the fights that I take to the mat.
Great. Excellent. Well, I am really pleased and grateful for your time today. Amazing talk. Thanks for doing the Q&A with us. I know the conversation will continue and I will catch up with you anon, sort of following on. But we're going to move into the final bit of the conference now. And thank you so much. And
everyone, reach out to me. I'm glad to talk to anyone who's attended this conference. Krishna, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Very much appreciated. Take care.
Bye bye now.